Generational curses get talked about a lot, and for good reason. There's a lot of things that run in a generation that people find to be curses, and it's a good thing to want to end those. And there's a way that the Bible specifically tells us how we can do it, that we don't have to run around trying to bind demonic beings or cast down the Jezebel spirit or none of that stuff that I've seen and other stuff. There's just a straightforward, practical application that we can put into practice that can change the lives of our generations for years to come if we just are willing to put in the work and put in the time and take an honest look at ourselves. So, generational curses are first mentioned in Exodus chapter 20, verses 5 and 6. And we're going to read from the NIV today because that's the one that most clearly is easiest to understand. So, this is what it says. It says, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." So, right there, people get into this generational curse and they want to say that is what's plaguing them. And it makes sense. Things like addiction get passed down from family to family, sexual, things like molestation and incest and even adultery or fatherless homes or mothers that abandon. It can just get passed down from generation to generation. So it's natural for people to want to term these things generational curses. But if you just take a look, it does say he punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation, and that's where they stop. But if you keep reading on, you get your answer. Of those who hate me. So he punishes the people that hate him for 3 or 4 generations, but shows love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. And that pretty much just, how do you stop a generational curse? Well, love God, keep his commandments. How do you continue in a generational curse? Hate God. Guess what? Guess what happens in those generational curses? You keep passing down the same old negative stuff, the same old toxic traits, the same things that have kept you in bondage. You pass on to your children. If you don't turn your heart to the Lord and follow his ways. The addictions, they just move right down the line. The lack of confidence. If you don't see your value and see that you were created for a purpose and that God thinks that you are very, very worth a lot, then you're not going to see yourself. See, like as me, when my mom not being in my life, I thought, well, if my own mom can drop us off and never come back, then I must not be worth much. And I don't want to pass that down to my kids, So as a born again Christian, I see the need to build them up and build their confidence and tell them they have value and tell them that they're worth stuff. And that changing attitudes, taking an honest look at myself and figuring out where, like my addiction, I don't want to pass that on to my kids. So I'm huge on drug awareness. Um, I don't want them to go to prison, so I'm huge on following the rules. I don't I don't want my kids to have such a loose lifestyle like I did. I don't want them sleeping around with a bunch of people. So I try to preach to them chastity, and so and those are things, and even curse words, the way that they talk, you can bless God with the same tongue that you can curse men. And so I try to, not only do I have to explain that to them, I have to live it out myself, and they have to see the fruits of my life so that they can implement that in theirs and to break those curses. You know, one of the things that the Israelites didn't get was they didn't want to take personal responsibility. They only read that very first part. They would say, well, God punishes the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation. And they had a proverb, which is very funny, you know, that they wanted to blame their current situation on their ancestors. Um, in Ezekiel and Jeremiah's day, they had done all kinds of idolatry, and they had engaged in temple prostitution, and they had, a lot of these local religions that the Canaanites practiced involved sex rituals and stuff, and some of it even had child sacrifice. And they wanted to blame. God had told them if they turned from him, he would kick them from the land. And in 587 BC, that's what he did. He sent King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon, and he took over the land, and he exiled them all. And they were all like, oh, it's the sins of our fathers. They're the ones that did this to us. And God's like, no, that's not it. And so he teaches them personal responsibility. If you go to Ezekiel 18:2 through 4, it says, what do you people mean by quoting this proverb about the land of Israel? The parents eat sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, you will no longer quote this proverb in Israel, for everyone belongs to me, the parent as well as the child, both alike belong to me. The one who sins is the one who will die. And similarly, Jeremiah 31:29 through 30 says, in those days, people will no longer say, the parents have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. Instead, everyone will die for their own sin. Whoever eats sour grapes, their own teeth will be set on edge. Now, if you're wondering what sour grapes has to do with sins, let me help you out a little bit. The reason they said the parents have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge is because what they're saying is, when you have like a lemon or something in it, makes your mouth do that. Well, that's what the children were saying who were getting ready to be punished. Babylon was coming and was going to take them captive and crush their city. And they were blaming it on their parents, their ancestors, for their idolatry and their idol worship. And so, because the parents have eaten sour grapes, the children were the ones whose mouths were puckering up. That's what that proverb means. And so, Jeremiah and Ezekiel are saying, and that's how they compare it. They're suffering now. They said, no, the reason why you're being punished is because of your own sin. Your own sin is why you're being exiled right now, not your father's. And so there's a level of personal responsibility. See, they were pushing it off on their ancestors. It's all our ancestors' fault while we're going through this. Ezekiel and Jeremiah is like, no, it's not. It's yours, and you need to own up to it. And that's what we need to do. If we want to break generational curses, we need to own up to it. I need to take an honest look at myself. I gotta say, well, you know, my family has always had to do hard labor jobs to survive. Well, then I need to push my kids to go to college. I need to break that. It's not really a curse to have to work with your hands, but it's a lot better to use your brain. Um, and like I said about the sexual immorality and the way they speak and the way they act and the way they talk, that's the way you truly, truly break generational curses. You have to, you know, um, it's by living a holy life. Ephesians 6:11, it says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil." Because if you look at the whole armor, it's righteous living. That's what putting on the whole armor is. That See, if you go to 2 Corinthians 10:3-5, it says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ." So, taking every thought captive is the way to destroy strongholds, and the strongholds are not, they're spiritual weapons, and these spiritual weapons is the full armor of God. And the full armor of God is how righteous living is, how you teach your children how to live differently than what you lived. And that is how you love God and do what He commands. And if you don't love God, what's going to happen? You're going to keep teaching those children those destructive behaviors. If you engaged in all kinds of fornication and you haven't come to the light, and you allow your kids to engage in fornication, guess what can happen? Early pregnancy, divorces, adultery, cheating, and the cycle continues. And then they teach their children, then they teach their children. Or if you're drinking all the time and you don't see a problem with it because you haven't found the Lord, and then you let your kid start drinking, guess what? They get addicted to it, and then they don't ever go to God, and then they let their kids drink, and then it just gets passed down from generation to generation to generation. That's truly what causes generational curses. It's the pattern of the actions that we continue to allow, that we continue to teach to our children, and our children continue to teach to their children. It is only when we come to God and we come to righteousness and we learn to put on that whole armor of God. It says in Ephesians 6:14-18, "Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth." So we've got to have truth. There's got to be a level of honesty, and the breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness, that's where you have to do what's right, and there's two kind of righteousnesses. There's the righteousness of God that we need to get into heaven, and then there's the personal righteousness that we have to attain to. And nobody's going to get it perfect, and nobody's going to be advanced right away. You just start by doing the good that you know to do, like it says in James. It says, "For him who does not do the good that he knows, for him it is sin." That's all you can do. If you know hey, I shouldn't drink anymore. Well, stop drinking. You know, start somewhere. Start small. The Lord's going to honor anything that we do in our life, you know, and then changing our sexual, changing the way we talk. I don't curse in front of my kids, and I don't let them curse in front of me. And just those small things start to add up over time, you know. And as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. So the gospel of peace is being put back into the right relationship with God, because there's a hole in our heart that has not been filled. And so until we're back in right relationship with God, we're God's enemies. And so we're not going to get that peace until he comes in and takes his right spot. And then after that, you have to take up the shield of faith, which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. So faith, you have to believe. And faith is something that you can't see, things that often don't make sense, but you have to believe to. That's just another one of the righteousness that we have to do. And then, of course, there's a helmet of salvation. That's the salvation is having eternal life, knowing that what happens here on earth is only temporary, and that our ultimate prize is heaven. And whatever sufferings we have to undergo, or whatever tribulations we have to go through, it's just a small price to pay for the eternal reward that we get. And then last but not least, it's the sword of the Spirit, and that's the only offensive weapon. But that's the Bible and the commands of God and the promises, and standing on those. And so really that's generational curses in a nutshell. It's not running around trying to bind these demonic entities. It's more about loving God and doing what he says, and striving for holiness, and then teaching our kids those things, and then them observing us walking in the same things that we're teaching them. That's where the generational curses get broken, because when we love God and then we do what he commands us to, and then we teach our loved ones, and then they follow in that, then they continue in the path, and the curse is broken. So I just want to share that with you. It irks me a lot of times when I see some of these pastors over spiritualizing the stuff and trying to make it some kind of exorcistic type deal, when it's a lot of it's just behavior patterns that happen when the transformational change happens, whenever we become Christians and we truly are converted, and we really follow his commands the best we can, and we try with all of our heart to teach them to our kids. So I pray this might bless you. Have a good day.